very briefly, I want to talk about myself. I studied architecture, and many years ago, and then I did my PhD in an interdisciplinary area between architecture and philosophy about human rights, and I have been working more in philosophical aspects, theoretical aspects in architecture. And lately I'm a lifelong student, of course. I studied permaculture design for many years, and it's long time that I'm studying building biology as well. I haven't been successful yet to attend, or brave yet to attend the exam, but I'm keeping learning. In 2018, during my sabbatical time, I went to City College of New York and worked with Michael Sorkin. And my main research was about Manhattan and the first indigenous people who lived in Manhattan and how they inhabiting that island and how changed the island. And that was a kind of turning point in my research in the past, 7 years. So the focus of my research from the material part of architecture moved to the builders, to people who are building, who are making habitats, making architecture. Because I realized that when I was thinking always about architecture, or many of us, when we are thinking about architecture, the first thing comes to our mind is that final product, that is the building or, the habitat that we go and live in. But interestingly, I realized that many of indigenous cultures, sometimes they built some structures that they didn't need it. Sometimes they did some building activities that actually they were building it just to demolish it. So it was surprisingly for me, or they were building it and demolishing it and rebuilding it and demolishing it or leaving it abandoned So, and I started thinking, is there other reasons for building buildings other than just buildings? And so this was my passion for the last few years. And just very recently, it's not just to promote myself, but just a few months ago, I wrote a proposal about a research that focuses on builders. And we want to study a group of people that they build together something and to see what will change in these people, both psychologically and as a social group, as a community, during this building process. And I was quite fortunate that we won our YBE Research Award of 2025 for this research. And while I was talking about this research with Anne and Marva during the summertime that I was on holiday here around this beautiful landscape, we thought that I can present some of my work on indigenous cultures and their building process and rebuilding process in this wonderful forum. So the title of this talk is Living and Dying Structures and the Transformative Power of Rebuilding. And as I said, I want to... So when I started my work in Manhattan in New York City, I looked back in the history of city to see how the city was many years ago. And then when I started looking back, I just realized that actually Manhattan, comparing to many areas in the world that I have been, working or studying, is quite new for humans because humans arrived to Manhattan after the glacial time. So it's quite, around 10,000 years, so quite new. Human history in Manhattan. And I decided to go back and see what was before human. So New York City and even New York State is known with the beavers. Even beavers is in the logo of the city council, municipality in American term, or the state of New York's main animal is beaver. So beaver is quite important for the state and for the city. So I looked back and I just realized that why beaver is very important. I don't know if I wrote it here or not, but yeah, beavers and Mannahata. Mannahata was the ancient name, not ancient, pre-ancient name, prehistorical name for Manhattan. So before Europeans arrived, and Mannahata is beavers. So basically, I realized that the island of Manhattan is built by beavers, and of course beavers are part of that island. So this is a part of a co-evolution. So the land and the animal, they evolved together. But how this happened, it is ecologically very difficult to go to the details. And I remember when I started reading about it in the library, the first few articles I read, I didn't understand it. So I went to the public library in New York and I found a book written for kids about beavers and for primary school kids. And I read it and I understood. Then I started reading more. So it made it more understandable. And I created this diagram that shows the cycle of life of beavers and their habitat. So basically beavers, so Manhattan is down kind of valley of New York State. So there are mountains up here, and then Manhattan is down close to the sea. So all the rainfall to the state comes through the rivers and passes from Manhattan and goes to the ocean. So what happens when the rain comes? It washes all the topsoil of upstate New York, and then it brings all the fertile soil to Manhattan. But what beavers do, beavers start creating those dams, but those dams are basically, for a while, those dams are quite strong, they keep the water there, but gradually there are cracks in the dams, and the water starts passing through that, and the dam functions as a filter. So the topsoil, the sediments of the water in the topsoil starts accumulating behind the dam, and then it makes it impossible for the beavers to live there, and the beaver starts moving somewhere else, and then the topsoil remains there and creates amazing, foundation for the forest. So the forest grows there. So when the beavers come to an area, there are, let's say, 10 trees there. When they leave, after 10 years, there are hundreds of trees there. So they create a forest there. And that is why in many of the ecologists, they say beavers as ecologic engineers, ecosystem engineers. And interestingly, after 10 years, 20 years, the beavers return to the same area and they do it again and they do it again. So I just realized, basically, when beavers to come to a land, when they leave, the land becomes better. So they have more biodiversity, they have more trees, they have more forests, they have, and that's amazing. So what about humans? Then I started looking at the first people of Manhattan, and they are Lenape. They're called Lenape. They used to live 3/4 of year in Manhattan and 1/4 of year up in Bronx when it was too hot. So there was nomad, but they had their main residence. They were building it in Manhattan, and I have to keep it short. Sorry, I am a storyteller. That's my problem. So what happened? I realized. I started reading everything about Lenape people from Western colonizers, writings. So all the Dutch or British people who wrote about Indian Americans and so on, and then they have very strange way of explaining. For example, I will give you one example. They say Lenape people, before they come and approach to a land to build something, they burn all the trees. So this is in their texts. And then there was an association of Indian Americans in Manhattan. I created a very good link with them. Every Tuesday we were going and singing Indian American songs with them, dancing together, and then gradually through them I could reach to some poems that, verbally came from ancestors of, Indian Americans, Native Americans. And then one day I found this word there. They said, that most of Native Americans, they offer smoke to their guests. When you go to their tent or to their, as a guest, they offer you a pipe or something, as a smoke. So it was written in their poems that the forest gifts us smoke and invites us to settle there. And that was how Indian Americans, Native Americans were explaining it. And then through that, I understood that these were natural fires, actually. So when a fire is happening in the forest, they see it as an offering, as a present to them, to invite them to go and basically start their habitat there. But anyhow, the story is, I realized every 15 to 20 years, they demolish these are called long houses. Usually, it's changed from tribes to tribes of Indian Americans, but these ones are the smallest ones, kind of 4 or 5 families live inside them. Families in our clans, by the way. 4 or 5 clans live there. But there are larger ones in other areas that, there are around 100 people even sometimes live in it. So they built these long houses, and every 15 to 20 years they demolish it. So the question was why they are demolishing it, which I'm trying to answer today. Okay, then, we all know that there are other indigenous practices that they do the same as well. They build and rebuild and demolish and, which I will not concentrate on it. Okay, so why they are demolishing and rebuilding? So 15 to 20 years is actually, interestingly, one generation when we look at the, that time, minimum 500 years ago. So every generation, they build, demolish, and rebuild. So every generation, they build their own habitats. But how they do build their habitats. So we have a great, too many stories about the generations and indigenous communities. So in indigenous communities, we have three generations. We have children, or, younger generation. We have adults, grown-ups, and we have elderly. And these people were always living together. And these 3 generations, they always collaborate while they're rebuilding their habitats. So while they're rebuilding their habitats, usually the elderly, they are supervisors because they have been through this process 2 times during their life before. So once they were child, they were observing. Once they were grown up and they were building. And now they are elderly, so they can guide the younger people how to build it. So these 3 generations, they try to kind of involve in this. And this is a knowledge transmission, knowledge transfer process for this. So the culture and the knowledge and the skills of building transfers from one generation to another generation through this rebuilding, through this act of rebuilding. So they can keep it. The best example, of course, is the Grand Temple in Japan, that still they're doing it every 20 years. They rebuild it, and through that, they can keep the culture and especially amazing carpentry that they have, and even the skills of growing trees and, all of those is still valid. But the second, more important thing is the social cohesion. So, building a habitat is a huge job. It's not a small job. But while they are doing it, this actually helps them to become a community, to become a tribe, to become each other's brothers and sisters. Because it is a hard job, it is a long process, so it brings all people around one project, one dream, one, they rethink about their habitats. I mean, sorry, I forgot to say it, but I will come to in one of the next slides. So they leave their existing habitat abandoned and they go somewhere else and build. So it's not just the same place. So while they're doing it, the new generation, it helps them to build their own habitats and they build it together. And while they're building it together, it strengthens them. They become a real community. This is very important for me, and as Marva said, I have a root in political part of architecture as well. So I always question, and one of the greatest things is about impermanence that I'm going to talk about it, but also it stops monumentality. After when you need to redo something, you don't do it with you don't spend 20 years to build something that 20 years later you are going to demolish it. So you spend only 2 months. And this hierarchically, during the time, historically, it stops any hierarchy, stops any power relation. It creates a more horizontal power relations in the society, which is amazing, I think. This is very important. So I started with more logic or more from Western point of view, more logic things, then I will go to more kind of spiritual things. It is because they leave it abandoned, obviously their habitat decays and returns to nature. Or nature reoccupies it, and that's amazing. And very similar to beavers, for many reasons, because of the level of care that I'm going to talk about it again. That when they inhabit somewhere, the level of care that they develop around those areas, when they leave that area, so imagine this area was burned after a fire or something happened there, so they came and chose that area, or, it was flooded or something happened that it was empty. So they act as ecosystem engineers and they leave all of the infrastructure there to decay and return to nature. And that's a great also learning for the generations for giving it back. Another very important function of rebuilding is you can adapt to the changing climate, the changing the conditions. Each piece of land, even in Manhattan, is different, has different conditions. So while you're redoing it, you try to follow the rules of your ancestors, but at the same time you're redoing it. We all know that every single detail of building is a design as well. So while we're redoing it, they rethink and they readapt to all the conditions that are changing. When I found this, I really got excited. This Tibetan sand mandalas, I don't know if you have heard about it. So they spend months to do this, and then they just erase it in one moment, and this is part of their education. Because learning about impermanence is amazing, because it is part of our quality as human beings. If we learn that we need to erase our footprint, and this is our responsibility. And I think this rebuilding is helping all of these indigenous cultures to understand that okay, this was my footprint, but it is because I am an impermanent person, I'm going to die. So everything that I'm making should die as well, and this is part of their ethics. And then I start to become more nonsense gradually. So I started more, as a look. I decided to start looking more smart at the beginning. So you start believing me that I'm not just, So this cosmic relations is very interesting. This word is spiritual, unfortunately, especially for us people who live in Middle East, is something a bit scary to enter, but I think it is very deep and amazing. It is all about our relations with everything, with the way we define our relations with universe, with cosmos, with stars, with with planet Earth, and I think this is super important even for us in this time. When we see that each particles, each atom in our body also are part of stars, because we came from stars, but billions of years ago. But the stars are living inside us. So we have particles in our body that their age is billions of 10 billion years, as deep as Big Bang. We start redefining our relation with the cosmos. And one of the things that indigenous cultures, while they are rebuilding, they're doing, they do it according to some cosmological calendars. So they do it in a specific, as I think Ann said, when even they go to harvest the branches of trees, they look for a season, they look for a day, they look for the specific time that sun passes, the star is there, the moon is here, and these are very important. So these buildings or habitats are not only on the earth, they are part of the universe, they are part of those, stars. It's very interesting. There are some very nice, very good studies, anthropological studies about some indigenous cultures, that when they ask, so imagine an indigenous community living in a valley, there are some mountains around, so they go and ask the people, when is your birthday? And they say, there. And this when and, time and place, they come together. And the reason is, they know that their birthday, sun sets there in that part of the village. So that is how they know. So it is how they connect time and themselves and planet and stars, everything together. So when they always do it in a certain cycle, that brings them a kind of connection, a kind of cosmological connection, which is very important. Especially you can imagine, thousands of years ago when you were living. Another very interesting part of it is about a balance between remembering and forgetting. When you rebuild and, kind of demolish and rebuild, you try to remember something, but you try to forget something as well. And that is even psychologically, but also spiritually, it's very important. So for them, when I'm reading their poems or their, songs, they speak about spirits, they speak about bad spirits or bad events that happened or something that they are not very happy about it. And this helps them to purify all those environments from all of those bad memories and rebuild it. And that is helping them to build peace. One of the shocking things that I saw is some of indigenous communities, when someone kills a children of a family, what they do, they ask that person to become children of that family. So that family adopt that murder as their child instead of their child that they have. And this is a very spiritual process for them, because that helps them to forget their grief, but also help them to re-establish their relations with a person who is the murderer of their child, but also, heal that wound that, is painful, yeah. I won't be emotional more. I try. So this purification and forgetting is part of this rebuilding process. But more importantly, indigenous cultures value reciprocity, because what they see is, as I said, they see, okay, forest is offering us land, forest is offering us trees, forest is offering us this. What we offering to forest instead? So this is constantly their question. So they go to river, and river offers them fish. And they say, okay, what should we offer to river. So it is a constant relation with the land, with everything, with nature, with all the beings, that okay, if you're giving me something, I'm giving something back to you. And I think this process of rebuilding, I'm not going to read all of this. I know I talk too much. Sorry. The other very important part of it is this kinship. So, some of these Polynesian indigenous people, they draw the faces of their ancestors on their ceilings inside their house. So when they lie down to sleep, they see all of their ancestors for, many years, and they can talk to them. And because they believe that we become what we are, we define ourselves as body, but they don't define themselves as body. They see themselves as a form of life that becomes body, but then can become something else. So for that reason, when they see a tree, they can believe that that was their mother, that was their grandfather, that was their, or it is their child, or it is their grandchild is there. Because also they're not living in a linear time, they're living in a cyclical time. So future and now and past, they're all living at the same time. So for indigenous people, everything is their ancestors, everything is their grandchildren, they are their relatives. And many of them, even again, when you're reading their poems, so when they want to name buildings, they name it with the people's name. They name it as, Big Brother building, young sister building, because it is their young sister, it is their big brother. And this relational, all these relations with the materials, with the bodies, with the land, with all of this helps them to develop their relations. Some conclusions based on this, and some, for the future. Now, what we can learn as modern culture to use this. There's one thing, again, spiritual, cosmological time. One of the things that I think I can translate it to Western mindset from indigenous practices is we have a life cycle, yeah? Many of us, we live only 120 years, yeah? Or 125, hopefully. Not more. And the materials, they have their own life cycle as well. For example, a rock. It takes millions of years to be created, and it takes millions of years to get down to a dust, or a soil, a dirt, or whatever. So it has a very slow life. But if you look at a tree's life cycle is very close to human life cycle. So for that reason, one of the things that indigenous cultures is using as I used to call it eticometer. So it's a parameter that measures how ethical is your behavior. One of these parameters was time, lifespan of materials. And because stone's lifespan is too long, so when you break this stone, when you go to somewhere and break one stone to half, you do a big change in the life of this stone. But when you cut a tree, you don't do that much change, because you can replant a tree, and during your lifetime that can grow. So for that reason, most of indigenous cultures, they used stone only when they wanted to build something for the spirits, not for themselves, because spirits live very long time. So this was one of the parameters. Thank you very much.
No, please.
I will finish it. Just 1 minute here and 2 minutes. So the idea of flux and fix is there is a flux of nature that is flowing. There's something flowing in the nature. There is an evolution. There is a life cycle of every single materials. There is water in our bodies that You know, most molecules of body in our body, they are 60 million years ago. They are 60 million years old. So, majority of my body's age is 60 million years. They witnessed dinosaurs. Can you imagine? So there is this flux, this journey of these materials, the water's material, and the water material on planet Earth. They break down to atoms and become again molecules during the photosynthesis only. And it takes 100 million years for all the water on the planet to return that cycle. So that's amazing. So this is the flux. But the fix is when we try to stop it, and we try to demobilize this flux. And this is what we should avoid always. And when I look at how this happens, I created these 4 scales. So there is a wilderness, which is about co-evolution, coexistence. So we are wild actually, you know, as much as we try to say no. It's still our body is wild. Still we have loads of bacteria in our gut system and everything that we have no control over them. And that wild us lives in wilderness happily as part of it. But we started learning to tame the nature, to cohabit with other things together. This is something that indigenous cultures do really value. The picture in the middle, the left one, that shows how indigenous people were creating their dams, small dams to catch fishes. They used to choose only the small streams of the river to not create big impact, you know, and they used to put those sticks there in a way that smaller fishes can, you know, escape and only big fishes can stay, and you know, it's amazing. But then the next stage is domestication or cultivation that emerged very recently in human history. And that is when we start changing the genetics of nature, when we start doing too much, you know. But still it is natural, you know. It's still, we allow nature to do something, but we start changing it too much. But the last one, which is the image up there, it is colonizing, fixing the nature. So when it is, we just turn the river to something that is not river anymore. And we have a lot of them in return. Thank you very much. Sorry if I couldn't.